Welcome to today's Industry Insights webinar, Higher Ed CISO from Tech Manager to Strategist as part of the EDUCAUSE Transforming Leadership webinar series on navigating security, governance, and organizational excellence. My name is Jason Martin. I'm a Learning Programs Manager at EDUCAUSE, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. The content for this webinar is provided by Vantage Technology Consulting Group, a 2026 EDUCAUSE strategic partner. EDUCAUSE is working closely with Vantage Technology Consulting Group this year to strengthen the collaboration between private industry and higher education institutions and to evolve the higher education technology market. Please be on the lookout for other opportunities to connect with Vantage Technology Consulting Group throughout the year. EDUCAUSE is also pleased to welcome our other panelists today. They will introduce themselves in just a moment, but I want to give you a brief orientation on our session's learning environment. We hope you'll join us in making the session interactive. To do so, you can click on the chat or open the chat by clicking on the chat icon at the bottom of the presentation window. You can use the chat throughout the webinar to make comments, share resources, and to post questions for our panelists. When you do so, please be sure to select everyone from the chat dropdown so that you can engage with all participants. We will have a Q&A as a part of the presentation, so we encourage you to type your questions into the chat throughout the webinar. If you have any technical issues, you can send a private message to me by selecting panelists in the chat dropdown. And as always, the session recording and resources will be archived later today on the EDUCAUSE website. With that, thank you for joining us. And Joanna, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, Jason. Thanks so much. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Joanna Grama, and I'm a senior principal and partner with Vantage Technology Consulting Group. I lead our education information security practice, where I work with colleges and universities to address complex cybersecurity, policy, and risk management questions. Today's session explores the evolution of the CIS role from perimeter defender to enterprise risk leader. Many of us have lived this evolution and are embracing the strategic CISO role. I'm joined today by four incredible panelists who bring years of experience and wisdom to our conversation. And I'd like to invite each of them to briefly introduce themselves. So if you could share your name, title, institution, and perhaps a fun fact about yourself, that would be great. And I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So Matthew, can I turn it over to you, please?
Joanna, thank you. I'm Matthew Dalton. I'm at George Mason University as the Chief Information Security Officer. A fun fact about me, for me anyway, that's fun, is I am a huge Marvel nerd. Even with the slump after Endgame, I still watch all the shows and yeah, have been big into the comics through most of my life.
Thanks, Matthew. Hunter.
Good morning and afternoon, everyone. I'm Hunter Ely. I'm an associate vice president here at Advantage. I work exclusively with colleges and universities on the cybersecurity and IT strategy practices. I'm really glad to be here. I spent about 20 years in higher ed IT before coming to Vantage, 7 years as the CISO at an R1. So I really have lived most of these problems and look forward to continuing to help institutions out there. I guess for my fun fact, I'll say that I've demonstrated my commitment to this webinar by using a Mike Tyson quote. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And so I chose to trip over my dog and fall into a piece of furniture this weekend. So I showed up with a black eye to keep the commitment real. So thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Hunter. Your commitment is noted. Stephen, could we do you next, please?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Gay. I'm the Associate Vice President for Cybersecurity and Chief Information Security Officer at Kennesaw State University, which is just north of Atlanta. We have about 43,000 students, third largest university in Georgia. So fun fact about me, just really fast. So CISO was not my first job choice. I was going to be a pilot when I was a young person. I actually soloed when I was 16 years old. And hopefully as I get closer to retirement, I actually may return to flying, but we'll see.
Thanks, Stephen. And Renee.
Good afternoon. I am Renee Peters. I am the Chief Information Security Officer. New appropriate title effective May 1st. Before that, I had a very long, confusing title. So I am now officially a CISO at Northeast Community College in Norfolk, Nebraska. So Northeast as in Northeast of the state, not Northeast of the United States. Fun fact about me, I just moved to the city after living in the country for 20 plus years and having the wide open skies of an acreage, I am now living in the city with people in my backyard and getting used to neighbors.
Renee, good luck on getting used to neighbors and congratulations on your brand new title. That's fabulous. So we'd like to be as interactive as possible today. So if you'd like to share your own fun fact in the chat, participants, we would be happy to read them and enjoy them. But with that, let's get started. We have some questions prepared for today's webinar. However, we'd love for it also to be interactive. So again, if you've got questions, please put them in the chat as well, and we'll be on the lookout for those. I'd like to start by setting the stage, and I think I would like to address this question to all of you as we get started. I'm curious if you had an aha moment in your role as CISO. When did you realize that the job that you were hired for was not the job that you actually had? And more importantly, did anybody warn you? So, Stephen, could I start with you? And then we'll do Matthew, Renee, and Hunter if you all have a story you'd like to share.
Sure. The aha moment for me was realizing that I actually had not been hired to secure the university in the narrow technical sense. Instead, I had been hired to help Kennesaw State University make informed risk decisions. And that approach is how you change how you approach like everything, because it's not a technical problem you're dealing with. It's ultimately you stop thinking in terms of firewalls and routers and operating systems and tools and controls. And instead you start thinking about trust and building relationships and the importance of those people relationships and timing and communication. And, ultimately whether the organization is ready to absorb those kind of changes that you're recommending. Sometimes they are, sometimes they may not be this year, but maybe next year. And you also begin thinking about hiring and retaining the team that's, internally and through partnerships, it's ultimately going to make you accomplish and help you be successful in that goal. And no, I don't think anyone really fully warned me but at the same time, I never felt unsupported here at Kennesaw State.
Thanks, Stephen. Matthew.
For me, it was one of those that was a natural progression, but the aha moment was very similar. That I grew up in my career grew up in a highly technical background, and recognizing that wasn't the thing that was going to be serving me going forward, and that not everything has an answer, but everything has a negotiation. And that there's a lot of soft skills that you have to learn, and understanding the context of the business is much more important than understanding what flags a particular command needs within this role. Stephen did all the good parts, so I'm just having to kind of fill in some of those blanks.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. Renee, what about you?
My big aha moment was that not everybody knows and understands what I know and understand. So security doesn't come naturally to a lot of people, and you have to explain why it's important to do some of these things, and you have to sell your value and sell your program and try to convince people why it's a good idea to do things, and then accept that they still may not do them. You don't have the ultimate red button of no, stop the chain. You can say, well, I don't think that's a good idea, but if we still need to do it, then I guess we need to do it. That was a little shocking for me that, oh, well, I can make a recommendation, but that doesn't mean they have to follow it.
Oh, that would be troublesome. Hunter, what about you?
Yeah, several good points. I'll say that when I was brought into my university, I had to build a team. I was the first full-time CISO. The CISO before me was also coming out of infrastructure, so there were several things that we had to do right off the top. Learn how a security team operates in a world where they haven't had to have that oversight. Building out those relationships and understanding what the registrar needs from us and what the HR folks need from us. But I think the biggest misconception I had, and I think Renee, you said this in a different way, was that you have the title but no real authority, and that authority you have to earn, because in these decentralized power centers, you have to work the politics of the university and within the IT department just to build out those those trusting relationships so that you can get that authority. So you're not bestowed with it, you have to earn it. And that's a much different way of thinking about this.
Oh, those are all really good points to get us started. We have some prepared questions. Remember, folks, today, if you've got questions for the panelists, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll get to them as fast as we can. But I think I'd like to address the next question to Matthew and Renee. What was the moment when you stopped thinking like a technologist and really started to think like an executive? Was that a choice, or did something really force that transition for you?
That's a great question. And I think that going back to what I was saying in terms of my fun fact, um, there's not a specific moment, but the aha for me in terms of that pivot was there was the movie Doctor Strange. There was a point in there that was the pivot in the character arc, and I think it was the same for me of that the realization of it's not about you, and recognizing that we can have all the technology in the world, this amazing security program, and everything else like that, but if it's not serving the students, if it's not serving the faculty, the researchers, then it's not the right thing. And helping to go beyond the stop thinking. I don't think that I ever stopped thinking like a technologist, but it's the adding on the fact that we are here as part of the university. We aren't here just for our own sake, and really internalizing that was that moment for me. And I don't think it was a choice or something that forced it so much as um, that dawning realization of it doesn't matter whether it's Unix or Windows, it doesn't matter whether it's XYZ, it matters whether it is serving who we are serving.
Yeah, we're a little different. We're a small community college. And so I have a team now officially of two, me plus one. And so I don't really have the option of not wearing both hats. I have to be the technologist and know the systems and get in day to day and do things. But I also have to be that strategist and think about where are we taking our program? What are we going to do next? How can we improve our maturity and our posture? And have to be able to convince my executive team why we need to do those things. So when you're a small institution, you have very small budgets, you really have to be strategic about where you're putting those dollars. And so I have to be able to not only come up with the plan of what we want to implement to improve and mature our program, but then I'm usually one of the people also implementing it. And so I have to wear both hats and play kind of both sides and know how to change my language from the technical side, working with the actual infrastructure teams, to the executives and be able to communicate that importance to them.
I just have this visual, Renee, of you like putting on one hat, taking off the other, the other hat. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to turn to Stephen and Hunter next. And this sort of follows on to Renee's comments. How do you stay close enough to operations to lead well without actually micromanaging the people who are doing the work?
So I don't know, Hunter, do you want to go or do you want me?
Either way, I can go and you can riff on this
Yeah, of
if you'd
course.
like. So for me, it was like to Renee's point. Like I started out with a team of me, right? A team of me and an account manager. And for me, it was lead by doing, and then helping other people do, then ultimately lead by enabling as we built the team out. When you're on a small team, the value is technical, right? And as the team grows, your value shifts to being able to carry that message up and down management, as well as getting everyone on the same page for that, for your security strategy. So for me, it was a progression, but I had some helpful mentors, and my mentors told me, he said, you're moving out of the band and into the orchestrator spot, right? You're going to be directing this thing. So put down the instrument and start orchestrating. And as I made that transition, that's when I really learned how you have to make friends with all of the various offices out in the university, find out what they're struggling with. And once I was able to do that, then I could stand back and say, now I can let my team work towards a set of deliverables, right, or a set of goals. And my job at that point is really just to help clear the decks, make sure that they have everything they need. And luckily, being able to make that transition sort of gradually over a couple of years made it much smoother. But having the mentors in place to tell you how to become that director, that orchestrator, was incredibly important for me.
No, Hunter, you absolutely hit the nail on the head. I mean, and I definitely want to circle back to something Joanna said, which she said micromanagement. And one of the things that one of my mentors, and you said it also, Hunter, is like having mentors, having those individuals that you can, have very frank and honest conversations with regarding your leadership journey, because this is a journey. And ultimately, how do you combat micromanagement is, the skills that got you here, to your point, regarding the evolution of a small team to a larger team, the skills that made you successful in that smaller team are not necessarily the skills that are going to make you successful at a larger, like with a larger team and a larger set of responsibilities. They're going to be critical, but you're going to build on them. And one of the things that, has really resonated with me in the last 2 or 3 years is, when projects don't get delivered on time, when external pressures increase and the president is calling or the CIO is calling, it's so easy to revert back to that micromanagement, but to say, get out of my way. I'm going to roll my sleeves up and just like, get out of the way. I'm going to do this. And you have to fight that. Like you have to really stop, and you have to say, like, look, I built this team. I trust this team. These people can do things much better than I can in so many ways. My job is to set that direction, remove obstacles, like certainly talk with the CIO, talk with the president to let them know where the team is, but ultimately my goal is to be the blocker. They're running the football. I'm just blocking them where they can get down the field and make it to the end zone, to use the sports analogy. And if I'm not doing that, if I'm constantly telling skilled experts in my team or external teams how to do their jobs, then either I'm not trusting them, or, I haven't given them enough clarity and I'm failing at my job as a leader. And that's really tough, is finding that balance, getting back to like, how do you fight and combat micromanagement? It's, you don't want to be fighting the fire, but you want to be close enough to see the smoke and understand it's either increasing or decreasing. So it's a great point.
Stephen, I wanted to just add on one little practical thing that I would do, and it took a while to work, but different projects had different leads, and often because of the size of our team, I would be on that team, right? But I would choose someone else to lead that team. So for the purposes of that particular project, I was reporting to someone else, for all intents and purposes, and I made that very clear so that they understood, like, no, this is your project. I'm in assistance mode, and that really helped build that trust, because again, all these things are built on trust.
I really like what is, I think, the underlying current in both of your comments about micromanaging is that it's based on fear and lack of trust. And so being able to move beyond that is super important as you go through your leadership journey. I'll note you all have mentioned communication now in every single response. So I think I want to ask about communications, because it seems that communicating is a big part of the CISO role today. Stephen and Renee, how do you keep your president or board up to date about the state of cybersecurity on your campuses?
So, so for me, we've really made shifts away from the cybersecurity role and the CISO role only being visible when something goes wrong. Like when there's an incident and, here comes the CISO, and like the CISO is all about, this third party vendor who may be named infrastructure, who has suffered a really large incident. And that's the only time they see you. And you've got to get away from that. Like ultimately, we're here for risk management, and the way that you get in front of the board and you communicate in an effective way, and Matthew said it earlier, is we're here for the business. We're not here for security. Is ultimately, we want cybersecurity to be understood as an ongoing enterprise risk function. So we at Kennesaw State have worked to create a regular communication rhythm through annual reporting, which by the way is a requirement of GLBA, key performance indicators. And the trick with key performance indicators is make sure you measure early, because you want to measure improvement. And if you wait until measuring till you're done, then that improvement's hard to capture. And trend data that ultimately tells a risk reduction story over time. Things like training completion and identity and access management improvements, phishing resilience. Those are all the most impactful when you tell them as a story over prolonged timelines versus just only being there when incidents arise.
Yeah, and going back to Hunter's comment on, being the orchestrator, if no one is conducting the symphony, it's just a whole bunch of noise. And so you have to be that person kind of out in front of everything. And if you're not communicating directly with your executives and your board, they're going to hear all the noise. And they're going to hear what's going on out in the news, and they're going to hear the chit chat going on at your institution, and they're not going to understand what you're actually trying to communicate. What are you actually doing? What are you effectively working on? The difference for me is it's a very small institution. It's a very small community. And I can actually go out and walk across our main campus, and I can talk to people, and I can stop in their office and ask them, hey, what are you working on? Where can we be more successful? Where can we help you out? And I see our board out and about around town, go out for supper, and, oh, hey, how you doing? How are things going? It's very different when you can have that personal relationship with them and they know who's in charge of your security program versus you're just a role, you're just a title, you're just, an email that comes through once in a while to people. When you can actually have that personal relationship with them, it really makes a difference to get that buy-in.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. We've alluded to last week a little bit, and I think it's fair to say that sometimes technologists care about technical threats a little bit differently from other executives. So Matthew and Hunter, how do you translate a technical threat into a conversation that a president or a CFO might actually care about?
I think that's a great question. And one of the things, even when I was interviewing here for this position, that I said about the CISO role is that it is really the first and most important job is as a storyteller. And that's essential when you're talking to whoever the audience is, whether it's faculty, whether it's students, whether it's the CFO, the president, the board. You need to be able to tell the story in a way that they can see themselves in the story and that they can see what they care about in the story. They're not going to care about what exactly happened last week in terms of what caused it. What they care about is what the impact was for them. So when you're talking with the CFO, you're talking about what is the financial impact if we don't address this threat. When you're talking with the faculty, what is the impact from an academic freedom perspective or from a research activity perspective? When you're talking with students, what is the impact to them with their educational journey, with their lives? So really understanding the story from their perspective and putting them as the protagonist, if you will, and then telling the story from that protagonist perspective and not from the side character that you are for them, but instead putting them front and center with all of it.
Yeah, those are great points. I think I will come back to storytelling because I have a point around that as well, and I think it's a great way to bookend this one. But I'll start with my dad does not care why his email doesn't work. He just wants to know when I'm going to fix it for him. And I say that to say this: when you're talking to the CFO, you remove technology from the conversation. It's really about understanding, and I talk about this all the time, capital R risk. And I just call it that because it's risk that the institution understands. If a server is compromised and data is lost, that's a technical problem. But the risk of what that data is and what the fallout of losing that data, that's the capital R risk. And that's really what the CFO wants to understand. So on those conversations, it's all about, here's the decision, here are the options, here's what they cost, and here's the appropriate risk levels for each. And then you can just make a decision based upon what the business needs are, and sort of remove the technology. When I was at Palo Alto Networks for a while, and I worked with CFOs on dozens and dozens and dozens of engagements, and never once did they care that we found a critical CVE. They just want to know what's it going to cost to prevent loss of data or loss of reputation. They didn't worry about how many patches we applied. They wanted to know what was the exposure and how was it reduced. But back to what Matthew was saying about storytelling. The poet Harry Crews said, stories is everything and everything is stories. And I think for me, all of my success has been about putting these technical problems and risks into a storytelling box that makes sense for those that are making those decisions. Because again, they're not technologists and they don't want to be. They want to protect the institution as you all do, and they want to do it in an informed way. And relying on you for that is really key to having those conversations be, again, trustworthy, built on your reputation, et cetera. Thanks.
I think that you make an excellent point with that. And the image, as you were talking about, the communicating the big R risks, is for us within cybersecurity, they don't care what it is that's keeping them from running on the track. They want to run the race. And a large part of our job is making sure the track is clear. And they don't care what it was on the track, how it got there, whatever. They want to know when they can run the race and how they can speed up. And so you're absolutely right. Being able to put it in the terms that they understand. And at the end of the day, they don't really care what the other part of it is. And that's okay. That has to be okay. As a CISO, you have to be able to understand that's not what they're here for. And honestly, that's not what we are here for either. Going back to some of the earlier questions.
So I saw both Renee and Stephen like nodding their heads vigorously while Hunter and Matthew were talking. Did you have anything that you wanted to pile on with their responses?
I think a part of that storytelling is helping people come up with it as their idea. The more you can let people convince you why they need to do something, the better engagement you're going to have when you actually need to do it. And so if you can try to tell the story well enough, or try to at least communicate maybe what the problem is or what that big R risk is, and have them come up with a proposed solution, or have them ask you to come up with a solution, it's going to roll out a lot better than if you come in and try to tell them, here's what you need to do and here's how you need to fix things. It really is transitioning from that technical into the storytelling and strategist person.
Everyone, the other panelists have covered it almost fully. I mean, for us and for all of us, I mean, the financial impact of a change is huge. And whether that financial impact is risk realized and there's a loss to the university, or, ultimately we're going to benefit, as we look at research. And, if we were a research institution, of which we are, and you were to suffer a large breach of controlled and classified information, ultimately it's going to negatively impact the mission of the organization. Our ability to solicit and recruit grants. I mean, that conversation resonates with VPs, with executive VPs, because it's the mission of why we're all here. To Matthew's point, they don't care what's on the track; they just care the track is clear. It's ultimately how do we communicate that in a way that they understand that we are a collaborative partner.
I love these questions, but I'm now thinking about curling, where you've got the scrubbers who are scrubbing the ice. So thank you for that really great visual. We have a question in the chat from David Cohn, and so I want to pivot to that really quick and ask you all. This is a great question, David. What questions should a CIO or IT leader be asking you on a regular basis to both understand the security program operations and be looking ahead to priorities?
I guess I went off mute first, unless Stephen, if I saw you were off mute too.
You got it.
If there was one question, it would be, what's the next thing that's going to hit the track, if you will. So it's what should we be looking out for that we are expecting to impact the business of the university, the teaching, the research, the learning, and then how are we getting into a place where we are positioned to be able to address that in a way that minimizes the amount of impact it has.
No, that's great, and I agree 100%. And for me, the questions that are most meaningful are always come up in the regular reports and the updates. I mean, and I'm one of those people that I love risk matrix. I love McCumber cubes and XY matrix, and like when you get to that upper right red hand corner, where it's the threat level is high and the asset value is high. The most engaged leaders are like, tell me more. Like, tell me what this blip is in this upper right hand corner. What is this and why? It's those conversations. It's the conversations of what keeps you up at night. And I get those questions regularly, and we have very honest and frank conversations. And it goes back to that leadership of like being engaged. And ultimately, we should be telling a story. My leaders shouldn't have to come to me to know what the risks of the organizations are. I should be able to communicate that as a leader to them, in a way that they feel comfortable communicating it up to their leadership. And if I'm not doing that, then there's a gap I need to fill as a leader. And I think that really varies organization by organization and size by size.
I think the way I would think
best
about
question they should be asking is, how much should I make the checkout for? But that's sorry, Hunter, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. I think that is the best question to ask. No, I was going to say the way I would think about this is that what's incredible about the higher ed community generally is that folks talk, right? They talk about struggles, they talk about successes. I think that any good CIO is going to be asking you the questions that their colleagues out in the world are asking. So having your ear to the ground, understanding sort of what's going on generally, and being prepared for those questions. So to answer this question with a question is, what are you doing to understand what the community is doing, or the community is struggling with, so that when the CIO asks, you have an answer to it. The other thing I would say is that CIOs are focused on supporting the business, right? Clearing the track. And so every question should be about how do we support the business, and every answer you give them should be, this is the risk profile of supporting the business in this way, and this is how we're going to improve that, or the long-term strategy to move from R2 to R1, or move into a different type of granting, so that you have to build a research security program to manage that. So there are all these things that are going on in the community that will drive those conversations. So it's always good to consider how the community is responding to all the changes.
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot of balancing the business operations with the security program. Asking the questions: how does this provide value? What's the ROI on this for us? How is this going to, maybe not even financially, but maybe it's in people's time. Maybe it's in processing. Maybe it's in just efficiencies and service improvements. Asking those questions of how is what you're doing going to improve these other areas of the business and operations.
Those are great. Thank you so much. So I was at the EDUCAUSE Security Professionals Conference, I think about a week and a half ago. I saw many of you there. And I noticed in the sessions at the event, there were some sessions about burnout. And I think it was acknowledged by many participants in the room that burnout is really real in our field. And so Renee and Matthew, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, how do you protect your team when the threat landscape keeps accelerating, or when we have weeks like last week where something is happening, but we don't have a lot of control over that thing that's happening? That's really stressful.
I think it really comes down to security isn't just a team of one or a team of two or even a team of 10. Security is everyone's responsibility. And the more that you can get your end users and all of your other, your employees, your students, everyone to understand that they play a role, what their role is, it makes your job a lot easier. So you aren't the only one out there trying to reinforce these things. If your users can reinforce things with each other, like, hey, that's not a good idea. We probably shouldn't do it that way. Or, hey, did you get your training done? Yeah, I think that's due by the end of the month. Um, you have to make sure that it's a shared across the campus responsibility. Um, you know, you have to um, look at what you're doing for some of your long-term people who have been there. They've been through the cycles. They've done the training. They know what they're doing. They kind of get stuck in that pattern. So you have to be able to kind of spice things up as well. What's new? What's fun? What can your staff find as a passion that maybe they can take on or that they can investigate as something instead of just getting stuck in the mundane tasks of what needs to be done? What would be fun to do? What could we do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as I was thinking about this question, there are really four things that come to mind. The first two, if anybody has read Simon Sinek or Sinek, there are two things that he has written on that really resonate with me for this particular topic. First one is Start with Why, is one of his books. And so that one is really understanding the internal, what are we here for? That it isn't just to turn a crank, it isn't just to be on that treadmill, but it's for meaningful change for the institution and for the community around it, and in many cases the world as a whole. The other one is that he talks about is what's called the infinite game, where he talks about that security isn't just one of those things where when the game's over, it's over. There's a winner and a loser. It's the rules of an infinite game are different than from a finite game. And from a finite game, the rule is to win. But an infinite game, the goal is to keep playing. And so helping people to really understand that we're not in this, that there may have been a major breach. There may have been something where an outside vendor had something happen where your week has just been shot, what you thought it was before. But that's not the end of the game. And help them to see that we are really in that infinite game, and what the why is for that infinite game. So those are kind of the philosophical purpose part. But then the practical parts are first and foremost, recognize the humanity in everybody that you deal with. That we are people first, and that we feel, we get tired, we get stressed, we get anxious about the uncertain. So helping people to have an understanding of the certainty that we do possess, and then how to deal with the uncertainty that we also have, is essential throughout. And then part of that also is kindness, is recognizing that people are going to have an off day, but showing up with kindness to that anyway, really goes a long way. And then the last thing is what Renee was talking about, is that bringing that spark of creativity. We aren't machines, we just work with them. And so understanding that people need novelty, people need stimulation. And that if we just keep saying the same thing over and over again, eventually they're going to stop listening. And so finding better ways to tell the story, or the next episode of that story, is part of that as well.
Stephen, I saw you come off mute.
Hey, and I'll just add, don't forget that we have one of the most inspirational and greatest populations out there, which is our students. And the way we perceive cybersecurity, information security, is very different than how a 19-year-old or 18-year-old student perceives cybersecurity. Like, there's nothing that gets me more jazzed than like talking to our students about what they perceive as risk, because it's so different than the way I perceive risk. So like, and sharing that with your team and like building those relationships, like it really does. It combats burnout as good as anything that we've dealt with. It's fantastic.
We are pretty lucky in that we have a very purpose-built mission in higher education that we can rely on. Um, we have some time. I don't have an extra question in the chat for y'all yet, but I have a question for you because you've all been around the block a couple of times in your roles. What advice would you give to someone who's an aspiring CISO? Don't all come off mute at the same time.
Trying to think of the right first response to that. I would say for an aspiring CISO, and this kind of goes back to the burnout question because I did want to add a point to that, is that, understand the mission, and that's the teaching and learning mission, the research mission, the various missions that come with an institution of any size. And anyone that wants to get into the security leadership role, spend some time understanding all of those businesses that you'll support, because those are going to be your champions. Into the burnout point, the only way you can do this reliably over time is to spread that culture out a little bit, and that means recruitment, right? Recruiting people on the wider IT team, recruiting people in the wider university, to really help carry the mission of teaching and learning through risk reduction and cybersecurity. So that's really the way I've thought about that, and it's been a great way to frame things like burnout, and it's been a great way to drive this forward in a way that's meaningful to whoever you're working with.
So my
I
advice
would
to
say,
aspiring, I'm sorry, Matthew, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I've kicked off a lot of these.
I'll be super fast, which my advice to an aspiring CISO is to work well with others. It's not about the technology. It's about the people. It's about the data. It's about the processes. And you're not going to be able to make a substantive difference to your organization unless you work well with others. Like I can't say it enough.
What I would say in terms of advice to give somebody is be curious. Don't just accept limitations, that are, and I mean mostly the limitations that you put upon yourself. And so there are a lot of things that flow from that. Don't be cynical. There is a lot to be optimistic about, but that's also part of that curiosity is being realistic. And so I think that's understanding what the limitations are, understanding what the boundaries are, actually help in terms of being curious. Test those boundaries, see if they are actually boundaries or if they're just boundaries that you thought were there. And then push, learn everything you can about everything you can. And that will serve you. Just staying in technology doesn't. So yeah.
I would say collaborate. I don't know of any higher ed institution that can tout that their cybersecurity program is the reason that enrollment increased. We're not out here competing with each other. CISOs are very collaborative. There are very good mentor programs, where you can find other CISOs to learn from. Even if you're just interested, you're not sure you want to take that path, talk to other CISOs, find out what they're doing, find out how they did it. That's probably the best advice I had when I started out. I had a really good mentor who helped me boil the ocean. I was starting out at an institution that had no security program, and I had to build it from the ground up, and I had no idea where to start. And once I started learning about all the different security frameworks and compliance and regulations, it was a little bit of the shock and awe effect. And I found a really good mentor that was like, it's okay, you'll get through it, prioritize, and ask questions, ask people. They've been through it before, and your security program isn't going to be a competitive factor with other institutions. So CISOs collaborate.
I love that. I'm going to pivot us dramatically. There was a question in the chat about anthropic mythos. We almost made it the whole entire session without mentioning AI, but here we go. We were asked, is anybody working on a plan for anthropic mythos? So, Matthew, what are you doing?
So yeah, I think that anthropic mythos, um, not to be too trite about it, is a bit mythical in what it does and doesn't do. There's a lot swirling out there. That being said, with the evolution of AI, um, it's it's going to be one of those things that is a paradigm shift for us. There's no doubt about that. And specifically, it's one of those where anything that we have that is reacting at human speed is not going to serve us anymore or for much longer, if it ever did. Uh, so what we're doing is we are automating everything we can, and we're integrating AI where we can as well in order to make sure that our responses are proportional to the threat that we have. So Anthropic Mythos is out there. There will be other ones that are developed just as well. And if so, the question is, how much are we using those tools to do the same defense as what the attack is? And that's and that's been true throughout the evolution of this. You could go all the way back to Caesar's times with the Caesar cipher. I don't want to bore you with those details, but there have always been, it's an arms race. There's always been an evolution of the technology and for both the attackers and the defenders. And this is true. This is another step in that, another stage of that. When quantum becomes fully realized, that will be another stage for that. But there will be things that we will be doing in order to address that as well.
Want to add a couple thoughts to that. I mean, I agree. I think Mythos is largely marketing at the moment. You know, to talk about how incredible Anthropic is, and what they've done is amazing. But I think for me, it just reminds me that we need to, get back to basics on these things. Protect your attack surface, build defense in depth. Do zero trust networking as much as you can. Some of these technical controls still very much apply. And I would say that when I was at CPPC and we were talking about this, my thoughts were generally around, well, the security companies that are out there are coming up with mitigations for some of these things. Looking at what these scans might look like, or where they're coming from, or some telltale signs for that. So I think that stuff is also coming. But to Matthew's point, I mean, it's an arms race. We will continue doing this sort of work, I think, indefinitely. The attackers and the defenders will just keep rising together. So as long as we can keep our basic security strategies nice and tight, I think we're going to be in generally an okay spot.
There definitely was a lot of talk at CPPC about sort of the peril of AI, but the promise as well. And so I'm choosing to hold on to those promising moments for how AI is going to help us in our jobs. So as we wind on to, maybe our last 7 or so minutes here today, I'm curious and want to ask everyone, if you had a mulligan in your cybersecurity career, for those of you who are not sports inclined, a mulligan is a do-over. If you had a mulligan, what would you do differently in your role as a CISO, knowing what you know now?
Do I
Steve?
just pick one?
Let's start with
Yeah.
Steve.
So I think we've touched on so much, regarding relationship building. But for me, and it's concrete now, is, I would have worked harder to build workforce development opportunities with our students, and integrating our students into the cybersecurity workforce at the university. We have student assistants. Most organizations have student assistants, but paid apprenticeships, class credit, like working with our deans, our chairs on finding those opportunities in the community and with our students to kind of bridge that gap. That's absolutely what I would have focused on much earlier. And we're certainly doing it now, and it will progress long after I'm gone. But it's something we should have focused on earlier.
I
I
learned
have to
some hard
just can I,
lessons.
oh, Hunter, can
Sorry.
I just ask just one real quick follow-up question to Stephen, please? Stephen,
Yeah.
what would you have said to your past self about investigating that earlier? Would you have said, no, this is a really brilliant idea, or what would have been the thing that would have pushed you over the edge?
So it's that perception. It's that perception of how students perceive cybersecurity and privacy and their data. I mean, the way that students perceive like their data and access to their data is completely different than my generation. I'm like, I got to protect all the data, and it's really fascinating when you talk to younger generations, the balance they're willing to strike regarding, well, hey, I'll give this data away if I'll have a really excellent customer experience. And I think you see that with some of the AI tools. And I apologize for bringing AI up again, but like that's one of the conversations that's at our forefront in our industry right now is how much privacy are we willing to give up to have glasses that can identify people, like when you look at them. That seems pretty awesome to me, but so I may be willing to give that a little privacy up. Like those perceptions are different for younger generations, and I think those perceptions will help build diversity. Creates strong teams. Diversity of opinion creates strong teams. You get a bunch of people to think together and you're going to have a weaker team. I think, the reason that I would want to build those avenues has everything to do with building that strong, resilient team.
Thank you, Stephen. Hunter, I'm so sorry I interrupted you.
No, I just got so excited. I've made so many mistakes, If I could have a couple of mulligans, I would say, I think the top one for me would be investing in relationships more earlier in my tenure, because meeting the biosafety officer at the primate center after an attack is not a good time to build a relationship. And I had the same sort of problem with the med school at one point. I had to meet the dean of the med school after I had ruined his day, so I didn't want to. I learned those lessons the hard way. So when learn who the decision makers are, the power centers are, and make relationships with those folks now, because you will have to recruit them to help you at some point. If it's, I love this idea. I think it was Renee was saying the idea of letting somebody come to that decision on their own and make them the hero of that story. Great. If they can come to the decision that you want them to come to, and they believe it's their idea, let it go and roll with the wind. The other thing I would say is that I struggled with culture change, particularly around things like MFA and phishing training and things like that. You have to be patient. These institutions have moved slow for a long time, and technology is a very, very fresh idea in the long arc of education. So for me, I would have had less of a problem, I think, with burnout if I would have had more patience with culture change.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks.
We work at the speed of education. No one gets a degree overnight. It takes 2, 4, 6, 10 years. And that is what you have to understand about it. I totally agree. You can't rush into things. You can't expect people to do things overnight. If I had a do-over, I think I probably would have spent more time listening when I started. Since we had nothing in place, I was doing all the research and finding all the regulations and the compliance and what we should be doing. And I kind of jumped right into, okay, here's what we need to start implementing. And here's a new policy and a new procedure and a new process and kind of talking to people instead of listening to the actual business. I had been at the college for a while. I thought I understood business processes. But when I actually tried to start rolling things out, that's when I learned, yeah, that's great, but that may not work for us because. And I just didn't listen enough at the beginning to find out the reason why. It was like, no, it doesn't matter. We need to be doing this. This is, hard and fast, the rule of what we have to be doing. Instead of understanding, there's always going to be exceptions. There's always other roads to get to where you want to get to, not just your road. You don't have the perfect map. You know that you need to get from here to there, and in between there's a forest, and you're not going to find that path until you're in the middle of it. And sometimes, you might have to climb a tree, you might have to cut down a tree, but eventually you will find a path and get to the outcome. But the more people you have with you helping you find that path, the better you are. You can't come in and try to tell them how to get through the forest if you haven't been through it yourself.
So trying to find what the one thing was, it's kind of like Hunter. That there's, yeah. Can I just have a bag full of mulligans? Would be great. But if I had to narrow it down to one, it's very similar to what Renee was saying, of how to get people to, getting people to come alongside with me rather than trying to go up against them and tell them, well, no, I know better. And so my dad, just like with any of us, I should have listened to my dad at a younger age. He was a college professor for decades. And one of the pieces of wisdom he gave me was to never argue with a faculty member, because the way that they got their PhD was by out arguing everybody in the room. And so really, and this to me is that thread that's tied throughout everything we've been talking about, is that the storytelling. If you're able to tell their story and how what you do fits into it, then it becomes their story. It becomes part of their story, and they walk together with you. And when you're writing your policies and your procedures and your standards, if you're doing it from the perspective of it's their story, then that really helps them to be able to come alongside you also, and for you both to be walking that path together.
I have to thank you all for being vulnerable enough today to tell us what your mulligan would be. I really appreciate that. We are getting to the top of the hour, everyone. It's flown by. Thank you to today's panelists for sharing your stories and your insights about your roles. And thank you for the chat conversation. It was really great today. I've enjoyed moderating, and I hope that you've all found the discussion useful. Today's webinar is part of a collaboration between EDUCAUSE and Vantage Technology Consulting Group. There are more sessions coming up this summer, and we hope to see you at those later. And if you can indulge me for just a moment, Vantage Technology Consulting Group helps you connect the dots between security, privacy, compliance, and risk. Our team are former CISOs and CIOs, so we understand what your world is like from the inside. If you ever need help with governance, security programs, or risk management, we'd love to talk. Thank you all for attending today. Jason, I'd like to turn it back to you to close out our session, please.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I would really appreciate the discussion. I was sitting here scribbling some notes, some quotes that you all did. This was great. So just a couple of things. Please take advantage of the links I've placed into the chat. There is the link to the in-session survey. We share those results directly with all of our panelists, so please take that opportunity to provide your feedback, as well as to please keep an eye on the registration page where you registered for today. The recording will be posted there by end of day today. And please take this opportunity finally to register for the remaining 3 webinars in this series with Vantage. We really appreciate the collaboration, and we hope that you'll take this opportunity to join us again. Thank you all so much for the wonderful discussion. Have a great rest of your week. See you soon.